Hey everyone, it's Most the Casual Commander. I'm BK, and today we have 4 commanders from Dominaria United. We have Busterkins playing Sheoldred, the Apocalypse. He's going to punish his opponents for drawing cards, so he's going to make them draw a card. Today's guest is Chris, who's playing Jodah, the Unifier, caring about all sorts of legendary creatures, as well as legendary spells that can cascade for him. Kyle is on the Go Wide plan with Hazezon, Shaper of Sand, who's going to use deserts to generate tokens. And J-Man is piloting Ivy, Gleeful Spell Thief, taking advantage of Ivy's ability to copy spells that target creatures. So let's get right into the game. If you've watched the show before, you know that Busterkins always wins the die roll. He goes first.
Nice swamp.
An astute observation from our guest, Chris. He plays a mountain for his turn and moves to Kyle, who drops Spectator Seeding, which comes in untapped, and he plays a Soul Ring. He passes over to J-Man, who draws and plays a beautiful forest from the new set as well, into a Soul Ring of his own. Then he passes over to Busterkins, and while Busterkins draws, Chris decides to mess with Kyle's library for some reason. This is what guests do on our channel, evidently. Busterkins dropped a swamp, and Chris plays a swamp of his own, before passing the turn over to Kyle. He plays Desert of the True, which comes in tapped, and then he passes over to J-Man. He drops a beautiful basic island, and then he plays Parcel Beast, which basically says draw a card, but could just put it onto the battlefield if it's a land. Over to Busterkins, he plays Gaia Reach Sanitarium as his land, which is probably really good with his commander out. On to Chris's turn, he plays a Breeding Pool, entering the battlefield untapped at the cost of 2 life. He then plays Lelia the Blade Reforged, a hasty threat that can exile stuff from his library, decides to leave it back on defense because he's a nice guest. Then on his end step, Enlightened Tutor is cast by Kyle, fetching up a Smothering Tithe to the top of his library. Kyle of course draws that for his turn, plays a mountain, and then he casts Smothering Tithe. So Kyle will start generating treasure tokens whenever somebody draws a card, unless of course they pay 2. Over to J-Man.
Are you paying 2?
Nope.
Cool, I'm gonna get a treasure token.
J-Man plays a forest as his land for turn, while Kyle slaps that treasure token down onto his battlefield. He'll then activate Parcel Beast, looking at the top. If it's a land, which it is, it could go onto the battlefield. Then he casts Unstable Harmonics, which is a Rhystic Studies skin from a Secret Lair drop. So on Busterkins' turn, Kyle gets another treasure. Busterkins plays Mikokora, Center of the Sea, enabling more card draw. Then he'll cast his commander, Sheoldred, the Apocalypse. And again, Sheoldred will drain opponent's life when they draw cards, and gain Busterkins' life whenever he draws a card. He passes the turn over to Chris, who draws for turn, takes 2 life from Sheoldred, generates a treasure token for Kyle, and then he plays a Godless Shrine. He casts Faboro Elder, which triggers J-Man's Rhystic Study, but Chris pays the 1 for that. And then he passes the turn over to Kyle, who will draw for turn, triggering Sheoldred. He'll get a command tower onto the battlefield, and following that, he'll cast his commander, Hazezon, Shaper of Sand, triggering Rhystic Study, drawing J-Man a card, triggering Sheoldred, and getting Kyle another treasure token. So there's a ton of triggered abilities happening on the battlefield. I'm pretty sure my players wanted to torment me because of all the editing that I choose to do, so I won't be addressing all the triggers, but I do think the text on screen covers it. Kyle played a Dryad of the Elysian Grove, followed by a crop rotation, so he'll sack his Desert of the True, and he'll go find a land. In this case, it's another desert, which is Grasping Dunes. This will trigger Hazezon when it ETBs, giving him 2 red, green, and white Sand Warrior creature tokens. So thanks to Dryad as well as Hazezon, he can play Desert of the True from his graveyard. This will give him 2 more Sand Warrior creature tokens out of the battlefield. And with that, he'll pass the turn over to J-Man, who'll lose some life, and then he'll play an island as his land for turn, followed by his commander, Ivy, Gleeful Spell Thief. And with her out onto the battlefield, he'll want to start targeting his own creatures with some cool stuff. So he casts Hardcover, which as it targets Parcel Beast, will also make a copy and enchant Ivy herself. He will then activate Parcel Beast, so he gets to look at the top card of his library. If it's a land card, which it is, it goes to the battlefield. He gets a command beacon out and passes the turn over to Busterkins. He'll gain a couple life, and then he'll play Cryptghast, which will double the amount of mana his swamps can produce, and it has the Extort ability as well, which is great. I love Extort. Some of my first commander decks were built around Extort, no big deal. Chris plays his commander, Jodah the Unifier, which basically says cascade when you cast legendary things into another legendary thing. So he plays Yoshimaru Ever Faithful, which will trigger Jodah, as well as other things. So he starts exiling the top of his library until he reveals a legendary card with mana value less than Yoshimaru. In this case, it's Rogok, Son of Roga.
That was depressing.
So Chris is super sad because he was hoping to have a much bigger Lelia after that, but only 8 +1/+1 counters. So then Chris starts representing Jodah's ability by putting dice on his creatures, and that's just the wrong answer, bud. +1/+1 counters go on the creature. Jodah just pumps the team. Leave it to guests, am I right? right. So he moves to combat a J-Man, getting another counter on Lelia, but J-Man casts Tamio's Safekeeping on his Parcel Beast, which makes a copy targeting Ivy, so he'll gain 4 life and both of them gain hexproof and indestructible, which he then uses to block Lelia. And then over to Kyle's turn, who drew, lost some life, and then he decides to activate Grasping Dunes. So he's going to throw a -1/-1 counter on Ivy, then he'll bring back Grasping Dunes because of Hazezon. He'll get 2 creature tokens onto the battlefield, then he'll activate Grasping Dunes again, repeating that process, chucking a -1/-1 at Ivy. He'll bring it back one more time thanks to Dryad. He'll get more tokens, and then he'll activate it one more time to wither Ivy to death. As a follow-up play, Kyle will cast Knight of New Alara, which gives +1/+1 for each color on multicolored creatures he controls. His Sand Warriors are now 4/4s, so he'll smash those into J-Man's face, dropping him down to 18. Onto J-Man's turn, he takes his 2 life from Sheoldred, plays a forest, and with Thunderous Fury casts Cyclonic Rift. Yeah, look at those graphics. High quality production, am I right? Your subscription helps. J-Man plays a Wild Growth, and everybody else plays the world's smallest violin, filled with sadness, because they don't have a board state. Seriously, please subscribe. J-Man activates Parcel Beast, and gets the card to his hand. Busterkins plays a Swamp as his land for turn, replays Cryptghast, which triggers J-Man's Rhystic Study, getting him a card, and Busterkins has to discard before passing the turn to Chris, who recasts Feybarrow Elder, and after that he'll recast Rogak, son of Roga. I love that name. Chris also has to discard before passing the turn to Kyle, who draws and plays Soul Ring to catch back up with mana, and then he'll cast Smothering Tithe again, and hopefully starts getting more treasures onto his battlefield. He plays Sun Petal Grove as his land, and then he passes the turn over to J-Man. He plays Eidolon of Blossoms, and yes, it's Eidolon. I looked it up on Google, and it told me that that's how you pronounce it. And with that out, he'll likely start drawing all sorts of cards. He recasts his commander, Ivy, gleeful Spell Thief, and he starts casting spells. He casts Curiosity, triggering Eidolon, as well as Ivy, so he gets 2 card draws off of that, and Kyle will also get 2 treasures. He drops Rejuvenating Springs, which comes in untapped. Then he casts Exploration, again drawing a card, triggering Smothering Tithe for Kyle. With Exploration out, he plays a second land, being a forest. Then he'll cast Karametra's Favor, which targets his Parcel Beast, again making a copy for Ivy as well. This triggers and draws him 4 cards, getting Kyle 4 treasure. Then he moves to combat to send a message at Kyle, dropping him down to 34. J-Man draws again thanks to Curiosity on his Parcel Beast. Then he passes the turn over to Busterkins, who recasts his commander Sheoldred the Apocalypse. J-Man draws with that on the stack, and then Busterkins casts Fate Unraveler. So whenever an opponent draws a card, it'll deal 1 damage to that player. That seems pretty good with Sheoldred out as well. And with it on the stack, J-Man yet again draws off of Rhystic Study, losing 2 life as well. Onto Chris's turn, he'll draw and take 3. Kyle grabs a treasure, and then Chris will recast his commander, Jodah the Unifier. And with Jodah out, Chris's team gets pumped a little bit, and then he passes over to Kyle. He plays Aura Shards, which seems really good against J-Man. And with that out onto the battlefield, Kyle recasts his commander, Hazezon, Shaper of Sand. Aura Shards blows up J-Man's Rhystic Study, and then Kyle will drop Dryad of the Elysian Grove again, triggering Aura Shards as well. So he blows up Eidolon of Blossoms, and then replays Grasping Dunes from his graveyard, triggering Hazezon, getting 2 more Sand Warriors and 2 more Aura Shards triggers. So Fate Unraveler dies, as well as Curiosity that was on Ivy. Then Kyle drops Adeline, Resplendent Cathar, blowing up the real Curiosity. He withers Cryptghast with Grasping Dunes, replays it, gets 2 more tokens, which blow up Wild Growth and Soul Ring on J-Man's board. Then he'll activate Grasping Dunes again, shrinking Cryptghast to death. Afterwards, he will recast his Knight of New Alara, again getting an Aura Shards trigger, and blowing up Exploration on J-Man's board. Kyle then moves to end step, and Busterkins says, "Here's a Deadly Rollick for your Knight of New Alara," exiling it. Onto J-Man's turn, he channels Boseiju Who Endures against Aura Shards, blowing it up. And Kyle gets to go fetch up a land with a basic land type. In this case, it's a Canopy Vista. J-Man craves violence and swings his commander at Kyle, dealing a couple points of damage, before passing the turn to Busterkins. He plays Greed, which, with Sheoldred out, basically says, pay 1 mana, draw a card, which is pretty great. He passes the turn over to Chris, who takes some life, and casts In Bolus's Clutches, targeting Sheoldred. In response, Busterkins activates Greed by tapping it. For some reason, he didn't need to tap it at all. Chris grabs Sheoldred, and then he resolves Jodah's triggered ability because he cast in Bolas's Clutches, which is legendary. He finds Kenrith, the Returned King, off the top, which is a pretty great card to sink your mana into. He then recasts Lelia, the Blade Reforged, which again will trigger Jodah, so he will start looking at the top cards of his library, exiling them, which unfortunately Lelia is on the stack right now, so she's actually not seeing these cards being exiled. All of the cards being exiled. Yeah, like seriously, Chris, do you have any 1 or 2 drop legendaries in there at all? I'm wondering.
Yeah, this is the deck, guys.
I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world. If you fail to find, it just gets put on the bottom of your library in a random order. But he finds Instrument of the Bards, so he gets to play that for free, and shuffles up the rest, putting on the bottom of the library. He moves to combat at Busterkins and J-Man, and before damage, J-Man activates Parcel Beast, finding an island which goes to his battlefield. Then he casts Cerulean Wisps, untapping Parcel Beast and Ivy, getting a couple of card draws off of that, taking some life. He found a Beast Within and targets the creature attacking him, Rogak, son of Roga, which is what I plan to name my next cat. Speaking of cat, here's Meatball. How'd you get up there, Meatball? You're too big for that. Alright, back to it.
Your turn over, Chris? Oh yeah, pass.
Well, Chris is new here, so he doesn't really know how we operate. I guess you'll just be known as Guest Chris from now on. So Kyle replayed Grasping Dunes, got a couple more creature tokens, and then he uses it to throw a -1/-1 counter at Ivy. In response, J-Man casts Snakeskin Veil on Parcel Beast, therefore Ivy as well, giving +1/+1 counters and hexproof. As a follow-up, Kyle drops the massive Craterhoof Behemoth, where X equals 12, pumping his whole team, and then he moves to combat. Adeline will trigger, getting 3 more human tokens. Before damage, J-Man tries to help out Busterkins by channeling Adawara, bouncing Adeline, but J-Man and Guest Chris are both knocked out of the game with all of that damage. So Busterkins drops to 15, and Kyle passes the turn. Busterkins drops Cabal's Stronghold, gains his 2 life from drawing his card off Sheoldred, then casts Baleful Mastery, but he did it for the reduced cost, therefore Kyle draws a card and takes 2 life. He then casts Infernal Grasp on Hazezon, trying to slow him down, but Kyle casts Flawless Maneuver in response, giving him indestructible. But Busterkins really wants him dead, so he casts Defile, giving Hazezon -3/-3 until end of turn, killing him dead, which would have happened if he was indestructible or not. Busterkins passes the turn over to Kyle, who draws, takes some life, and then casts Escape to the Wilds, which allows him to exile the top 5 cards of his library, play them until the end of his next turn, as well as play an additional land. So he'll reveal Cradle of the Accursed, Archaeomancer's Map, Rumor Gatherer, Swords to Plowshares, and an Exotic Orchard. He'll then cast Rumor Gatherer. This will enable some scries and some card draw. He casts his commander, Hazezon, Shaper of Sand, which triggers Rumor Gatherer, giving him a scry. And then he'll drop Cradle of the Accursed onto the battlefield. He'll get a couple more 1/1s and a card draw, which will also drop him to 23 when Sheoldred triggers. Following that, he'll recast Adeline, Resplendent Cathar, and then he'll go to the red zone, getting an additional 1/1 token off of Adeline in the process. Busterkins throws Sheoldred in the way of one of the 1/1 tokens and drops down to 6. Kyle will play his second land for turn with Exotic Orchard, and his third land for turn thanks to Escape to the Wilds as a forest. He passes the turn over to Busterkins, who draws, gains a couple points of life, then activates Greed, and in response to that, hitting the stack, Kyle casts Swords to Plowshares on Sheoldred, moving Busterkins to 10 life, and in a worse position now that he isn't drawing cards for pretty much just 1 mana. But with no immediate answers, Busterkins starts tapping and losing life to draw cards off of Greed, and well, the situation was pretty grim a couple of turns ago, but Busterkins does everything in his power to try and deal with his opponent to the bitter end. On Kyle's turn, he moves into combat and smashes everything at Busterkins' face, knocking him out of the game. And congratulations to Kyle. Job well done piloting your Hazezon desert-themed tokens deck. Well, we would love to hear from you in the comments. What did you think about this game? What are you excited about for Dominaria United being released? Are there any commanders that you'd like for us to showcase on the channel? Let us know, and as always, thank you for watching.